Mr. Vyas, the first question has to deal with President Biden's ongoing foreign trip. It's his first trip and currently he's in Geneva. Yesterday he was with his NATO allies and tomorrow he will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. So my first question to you is, how did you look at his meetings with the NATO allies, and do you think some trust was gained for the United States through NATO? And my second question to you is, what are you looking at for today in Geneva?
Well, today there's not much going to happen in Geneva except he'll have a meeting with the Swiss president, and he's going to have some consultations before the talks with Putin, which are tomorrow, which is going to be Wednesday, where they're going to have the talks. And that's the most all-important reason for Biden's visit. As to the meeting with, the G7, NATO, and, and the EU, the European Union, they've gone well for the moment. For this administration for the time being. Whether it's going to hold out in the long term, whether this administration is around or there's another one, we don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. But President Biden has been able to regain some of the trust that was lost between the allies. He's an expert at doing something like that. He's got widespread foreign affairs experience, Senate experience, and all the rest of it. So he's able to negotiate with leaders, and his key words were America is back. Now, hopefully they've believed it, that America is back. The problem is, will America stay? Will it stay back or will it not? That's going to be a long-term issue. But for the moment, I think they're all gotten to speak to each other. They've gotten to trust one another for the moment, as I said. And I think the allies know that they can rely at least on this president for the time being, at least through his term.
Right, but do you think that these allies are still worried about what's going to happen in 2024? There's always this shadow of President Trump that follows politics very closely. What are your thoughts on that?
Without a doubt, I'm sure that they're going to be, they must be looking into the future because they've already seen the past. And they know that this is one administration, but should there be another administration, whether it's Donald Trump or any other administration besides Joe Biden, there is now the feeling, I believe, around the world that you got to watch each administration as they come in the United States to be able to know how to deal with them. You cannot predicate any of your dealings on the past or on a previous administration, but in the future, you're going to have to deal with a brand new administration. And I think this is a reality that all the world's leaders have now come to figure out as far as we go, the United States. Don't forget that President Donald Trump, in many people's eyes, did a great job in foreign policy by asserting the power of the United States and asserting the fact that many people in his administration, he asserted, many allies were getting away with paying less than their fair share, for instance, in NATO and the United Nations, etc. So a lot of people liked that type of thinking. However, in the global context, President Biden doesn't think that way. He knows that we are the most powerful nation in the world, and therefore we also have the burden of giving out more than the others, simply because we have more to give out to the others. So yes, to answer your question, there will be doubts about the future, but that notwithstanding, they're going to just have to carry on and do business together, as if the past didn't exist, and now look to the future.
Right, and hopefully they get a lot of work done before 2024. Let's talk more about this meeting that's going to happen between President Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin tomorrow. President Biden actually has called him his adversary, and he's also stated that he has a very different view than his predecessor. My question to you is, why is he calling him his adversary, and what do you expect from these talks between US and Russia? It's been, really promoted across the media as one of the biggest news, but would any resolution come out of this?
First of all, President Biden has called him a formidable adversary, someone to be contended with and to be, in a sense, respected, because he is an adversary, and you've got to respect your enemies, because your enemies, it's better to get to know your enemy than not to. Actually, that was President Trump's thinking in terms of dealing with someone like Putin, or even the South Korean leader Kim Jong-un. But President Biden has called him an adversary, you're right, a formidable one. And the talks are basically going to focus on a couple of things. One of them is going to be the cyber attacks that are taking place here right now in the United States, and it could threaten the very infrastructure and the very foundations of this country. We saw that with the pipeline, the oil pipeline. We saw that with the meat distributor, etc. So there's a lot to be worried about in terms of cyber attacks, which by all evidence, intelligence evidence, is emanating from Russia, whether it's the Russian state or Russian crime syndicates, and whether it's the state, looking the other way and letting the crime syndicates get away. That's not the point. The point is now he is going to bring that up with Vladimir Putin. And I think what's going to happen in that case, if Putin does not, and I don't expect him to admit that there's any state involvement, if it is indeed Russian crime syndicates, I think what Biden's going to do is try to reach out to Putin and say, look, let's both have our law enforcement work together to deal with this situation, because it's not good for either country. So that's one of the issues. The other is going to be about election interference in 2016 and reportedly in 2019, 2020 as well. And so he's going to be confronting Vladimir Putin with that. He's also going to be talking about prisoner swaps. There are a couple of U.S. Prisoners in Russian prisons, and the same for Russian citizens in U.S. prisons. They're going to be talking about swapping those folks. They'll probably also discuss strategic arms, nuclear arms reduction, and getting back to, they don't want to go back to a Cold War, so I'm sure both sides would like to reduce any tensions on the military front. So I don't expect any miracles, but I expect this going to be a testing ground for Biden and for Putin himself, because he kind of liked the Trump administration, Vladimir Putin did, and now he's going to have to get to know the Biden administration as a Biden administration. He has met Joe Biden when he was vice president. He has met him when he was a senator, but he's never met him as the president of the United States right now. Right. So I'm expecting a lot of topics. Interestingly, President Biden has been preparing very hard for this particular summit. He has taken it very seriously. He has called in past experts on Russia from the Obama administration, I believe from the Clinton administration, even from the Trump administration. And he has sought all points of view, and they are right now, as we speak today, discussing those points of view in Geneva before tomorrow's all-important meeting.
It seems like the president is working really hard to repair these relationships and also protect the nation. Meanwhile, in the United States, another issue of gun law has been worrying everybody across the nation. We have seen many mass shootings in the country just in 2021. My question to you is, what needs to be done in the Congress? Because let's face it, there needs to be a gun legislation. There needs to be laws to really protect people from mass shootings. What does the Congress need to do? Where do we find a resolution for this?
The Congress and the legislative process is going to have to show they have guts to meet this crisis head on. Isn't it funny now? You mentioned several mass shootings, and you're right. Every single day, it seems there is a mass shooting. And have you also noticed, Aditi, that those mass shootings are no longer being reported as major headlines in the media? Can you imagine? That's the most frightening thing to happen. You've got mass shooting after mass shooting, and it's no longer being reported as big news. I mean, 10 people being injured, a couple of people dying, or maybe several being injured, several others being killed. And it's now like the second or third headline, not even the primary headline anymore. That's the state of affairs we've come to. It's going to have to be legislatively addressed. There is the Second Amendment. They're going to have to amend the Second Amendment. I've always said it's been written in a different time. It applied to a different time when there was a different type of armaments and a different America at that time, when there was someone who had the right to defend themselves and that type of thing in a particular environment that existed at that time. But today's environment is completely different. It's a global world. It's a diverse world. It's a fast-moving world. Weapons are more and more dangerous even as we speak. And should the Second Amendment be used to protect people in terms of owning assault weapons that can just kill you at one shot, kill several people? Is this a right? Should it be a right anymore? These are things that have to be thought of. These are things that are going to have to be legislated. But unless our elected representatives, develop guts to fight the big lobbyists, the powerful NRA, et cetera, and all those, the gun rights advocates. If they can't face up to them and stand up to them, it's going to be an impossible climb.
You know, the Supreme Court is going to handle and tackle issues such as gun rights and also abortion. My question to you is, can they make significant changes?
In gun laws?
Yes.
Not unless it's legislated first. I mean, one federal judge, of course, recently came out and said that assault rifles in California should not be banned and reversed that long-standing ban on assault rifles, saying he compared it to something ridiculous. I forget for this moment, but he compared it to something ridiculous, and it was like, I mean, what's wrong with this judge? He's saying that an assault rifle ban in California, which has stood the test of time and was brought in by popular vote, by popular referendum as well before that. I mean, it's become law in that state and has remained law. And someone comes and challenges it, and one federal judge says, well, you know, this should be thrown out. It does not abide by the Constitution. I don't think the Supreme Court is going to have much of a say unless it is first legislated. It has to go through the legislative process because it's a constitutional matter. After it's done that way, then the Supreme Court can decide on the interpretation of the Constitution, because that's essentially the role of the Supreme Court, to decide if a particular interpretation is correct according to the Constitution, which then the Supreme Court will analyze and validate. So first it's got to go through the legislative process, and then if anyone wants to challenge it, it goes to the court, and the court will then figure out, based on the Constitution, whether this type of legislation is actually legit or not.
Let's hope something happens about it, because I think everybody in this nation is tired of seeing people die to mass shootings. Another big issue that's been gaining attention of everyone is dealing with the fact that the Trump Justice Department obtained records of congressmen and journalists' phones and emails. My question to you is, how is this coming out now? And also, what was the purpose of them doing that?
Well, obviously he wanted to, what we've been told is that they wanted to get to the source of leaks that were coming out of the Trump administration at the time. Reporters' sources are sacrosanct, and reporters do not reveal their sources under normal circumstances. They, in many cases, not just the Trump administration, but previous administrations, could be threatened with imprisonment or acts or law enforcement action if they did not reveal sources. But it's a journalist's right to protect their sources. This was unprecedented. This was an overstepping of authority. In fact, it was an authoritarian measure, in my view, to try to subpoena secretly tap into journalists' phone calls, to tap into the records, the email records, and into those of the legislators, the opposing legislators, the Democrats, in this case, smacks of nothing but an authoritarian trend. Very dangerous from either party to try that. Very dangerous to happen in any democracy, and it has happened in many, many democracies before. There is precedent to this in several democracies around the world, so we should be very wary, because this is the greatest democracy on the planet, and it cannot be allowed to permeate our system. And it won't be, because Merrick Garland, who is the Attorney General, has promised that there would be some amendments, there would be some rethinking within the Justice Department to ensure that something like this doesn't happen. He has had a meeting just yesterday with the top executives of CNN, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, three of the organizations that were targeted, whose journalists were targeted. He has had meetings with them. They were very satisfied with the outcome of those talks. Congressional leaders are also satisfied with Merrick Garland looking into this matter and are waiting to see what will happen. They want bipartisan action in Congress to prevent, and in the Senate, to prevent this type of thing from happening in future. But the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said it's not necessary. He thinks it shouldn't be a political issue, but indeed it is, because it is political opponents who are targeted. It is journalists who are targeted, no matter what they're leaning. Usually journalists are supposed to be objective, but journalists' records should not be targeted. This is a dangerous precedent.
Yeah, that protection is very important of your personal records and contact information. I have two more questions left for you here. I'm sure you have heard the news about vaccines, lower rates in many states that are GOP-led, or they are red states, and they're not vaccinating anywhere close to states such as California, such as New York. New Jersey, everywhere where we're seeing at least 60 to 70% of most US adults in those states vaccinated with at least one dose. My question to you is, do you think these GOP leaders, state governors, hold responsibility of promoting vaccination drives in their states to tackle coronavirus? Why has this become a political issue again?
I think here there's a different issue that's arisen. I think in a lot of those states, you can talk about Florida, talk about Texas, and many others. What has happened is, I think the Republicans tended to speed up the recovery process. All right. So they began the vaccination process, but they didn't want to force it on citizens. And many citizens simply don't want to be told by anybody in authority, any power, any government, that, hey, you got to inject this vaccine into you. So I think there's a different type of psyche here at work. It is not entirely political. Yes, the Republican states were the first ones to open up, who really were in a rush to do so and get the economy rebooted in their respective states. And I think then once the people saw the economy rebooting, even though illnesses continued, in many cases it continued, Florida still has twice the number of COVID-infected patients and deaths compared to California, for instance, which was very, very careful and enforced its regulations for the longest time, and only today has lifted the mask mandate. Only today, Tuesday, as you and I speak. It's being lifted. California is the last state to do so. So I think there are a lot of people out there who are actually worried about the vaccine, who are not convinced entirely that it's something that everybody should take or they should be forced to take. And especially if they've had no one who's passed in their family from COVID or been affected by it, or if they've been affected by it and it didn't do anything to them, I think they're going to be naturally resistant to taking a vaccine. I mean, I can give you my own example. I was resistant to taking the flu vaccine. But why was that? Because maybe it was psychological. The twice I did take the flu vaccine myself, I felt sick both times. And I got the flu. And so for years, I personally felt it was not necessary to take the flu vaccine because I said it's the side effects or it doesn't prevent anything. That type of thinking I had myself as a journalist. I'm telling you, this is a different virus. It's a different illness. This involves life and death for sure. I've seen many of my own acquaintances and friends pass from COVID. So a guy like me said, well, wait a minute, I'm not taking any chances. I'm going to take this vaccine. So what I'm trying to explain here by giving my own example of the flu vaccine and my resistance to it is that it's a very natural human tendency. And I think there really is no need to make it a political issue. The only part being political that Republicans rushed to open their states long before Democrats did. And that's the only political thing I see in this particular issue.
A recent study actually is suggesting that about 29% of Republicans wish to not get the vaccine and probably won't get the vaccine. So here's to hoping that there are some changes in these states where there could be, more promotion of the vaccine. My last question to you is something I've discussed with you before, dealing with China and the origin of the coronavirus. Why are we not getting a straight answer from that country?
Simple. It's an authoritarian state. They're very secretive. They don't let the world know anything about anything. And they want to get ahead and be the world superpower, the only superpower in the world. It's as simple as that. It's a well-known fact about China, the state. Again, I differentiate the state, the communist regime, as opposed to the people of China. Two very different issues. It's an authoritarian state, has been for decades, and they simply will not cooperate on anyone's terms. Now the question for the Biden administration is to cajole them into cooperating with the world. And therefore, in his meetings with the G7, with NATO, with the EU, that's exactly what President Biden was doing, to rally the support of the European leaders, the powerful leaders of the world, including Narendra Modi of India, by the way, including Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and now his successor, the powerful leaders of the world to come together so that they're all on one page, not disagreeing with one another or each other, but taking on China head on. And I think this collective bargaining, as it were, and this collective pressure is going to force China to come to terms with the rest of the world. If, for instance, all of these folks decide we're not going to do business with you, China, anymore, we're going to cut off our air travel. This is a wild piece of theory from me. But what if all the powerful countries of the world get together, including Russia, by the way, come in with this group and they say, all right, look, if you don't tell us the truth about what happened here, we don't want to do any business with you. We don't want to have any dealings with you, and we're going to make life tough for you. I don't think China is going to have to, is going to be able to, stand up to that kind of collective pressure. If it's been divisive, if they're all divided, and Europeans are not particularly allied with the United States not with them, within Europe a divide over whether they should be close to China or close to the US, stuff like that, very dangerous for the global economy and for global prosperity and good health. And so I think the time is coming when China is going to have to be pressured, and then we're going to have to use all our intelligence resources. That means all of us collectively to find out the truth of where did this virus originate. Was it transferred, did it jump from an animal to human as suggested, or was it an accidental escape from the Wuhan lab or any other lab, or was it deliberate? Was it bioengineering? I mean, these are issues that are going to have to be seriously looked at, because this virus, you and I know, brought the entire planet to its knees.